Hi, I'm Sarah Smith, and I wanted to talk to you today about some issues of concern in Las Cruces Public Schools. Okay, so this video is primarily for parents or grandparents, anybody who is concerned about children who are attending Las Cruces Public Schools in New Mexico. And just a brief overview of the things I'm going to talk about today, some of the ways in which Las Cruces Public Schools is failing to educate the students. I'm going to talk about bullying, violence, and drugs in the schools, some new state laws that took effect last year that really impact parents' rights and their ability to know what's going on with their children in schools, how transgenderism is being affirmed in Las Cruces schools, also looking at age-inappropriate, sexually explicit books that are in the school libraries, and some ways to work on improving the situation. So just to be clear and kind of introduce who I am a mother myself. I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I'm very concerned about all the children in this community and the things that they are being exposed to at school, as well as what the school is not doing for them that it should be doing. I am part of the Coalition of Conservatives in Action, and that's a local nonpartisan group here in Las Cruces. I myself am politically moderate, and the group is composed of volunteers who just care about what's going on in this community and are trying to find ways to improve the situation. So in the Coalition of Conservatives in Action, I am currently leading the Education Action Committee. And I also organize a group of over 200 teachers statewide. That group has been going on for a few years, since about 2020. And through that, I get a lot of insight into what's going on in other districts around the state. So a lot of the problems I'm going to talk about today for Las Cruces are actually statewide issues that we see all over the state. And I'm also the first vice chair for the Coalition of Conservatives in Action. Now, the main goal for the Education Action Committee is to improve education in New Mexico. And that's kind of our big overarching theme of what we're trying to do. So I want to tell you about how Las Cruces Public Schools is failing to educate the students. Now, if you take a look at these proficiency ratings, this is from US News, so it's just a national news publication. And these are the most recent rankings for the four big high schools that are in Las Cruces: Las Cruces High School, Mayfield, Organ Mountain, and Centennial. I myself actually attended Oñate High School, which is now Organ Mountain. So I am from this area. I went to high school here as well as college. And if you look and see what's going on in these schools now, look at these numbers, look at the math proficiencies in particular. Mayfield High School has the lowest one, and they're running 6% mathematics proficiencies for kids that are coming out of this school in Las Cruces. The highest one of these is Centennial High School, and they're running 16%. So even at the best high school in town, you still have less than 20% of students who are proficient in math. The reading proficiencies are not a lot better, running from 30% up to 48% at Centennial here. That's again, so less than half of the students coming out of these schools in Las Cruces are testing as proficient in math, and that's a huge problem. Now, one of the other things to look at here is the graduation rates. That's at the bottom here. So you can see all of these schools are running in the around 78 to low 80 percentiles for graduation. What does that mean? So you've got kids who are not proficient in math, they're not proficient in reading, but they're still graduating. What does that mean? There's a big problem there. There's a huge disconnect. One of the big issues is social promotion in the schools, and this is happening all over the state. There are students who are not ready to move to the next grade, and they are not being held back. And so the teachers are having to deal with kids coming into their class who don't even know the material from the previous year. And that really changes the dynamic in the classroom. It makes it where the teachers have to spend a lot of time trying to help students who aren't even ready to be there yet. The students who are, advanced or who were at the top of the class, they're kind of left on their own just to do their own thing and figure it out, because there's just not enough time to deal with everybody when the teachers are trying to deal with all of these kids who are also struggling. And so the education for all of the students really suffers when this happens. Kids are not machines. Kids, they don't all develop at the same rate. They don't learn the things at the same rate. And that's totally normal and okay. So we need to make sure that kids who are not ready are able to be held back so they can get the maturity they need, learn what they need to before they move to the next grade. Another thing that's happening in Las Cruces Public Schools specifically is equitable grading. And this has been happening since 2021. The minimum grade that a student can get is in the 40 to 50% range. So if a student does not even turn in an assignment, they don't get a 0% on it anymore. They get a 40% or a 50%, and that's it. And that really skews everything. It will make it look like the students are doing better than they really are. It'll make it look like, you know, the numbers look better, but at the end of the day, the students aren't doing better. And this is a huge disservice to the students and the families in this district. Now, bullying, violence, and drugs in Las Cruces Public Schools. These are some of the top concerns that parents have. I've talked to a lot of different parents in this district as well as other districts around the state. And this is another issue that's happening statewide. There are problems with bullying happening, and a lot of the parents really feel like they're not being heard. They feel like the situation's not being dealt with appropriately. One of the other members of our Coalition of Conservatives in Action, Juan Garcia, he's actually the chairman of our group. He is on the Equity Council, and so he has learned quite a bit from that in visiting different schools, talking to different people. You know, one of the middle schools here, for instance, Lynn Middle School, just from talking to the admins at that school, it was found out that there's a lot of bullying going on there, even to the point that the students are bullying the teachers because of their race, because of their religion. And so these things are happening, and there's a real big breakdown because there's no real enforcement. There's no real consequences when the students are doing this. And so it just keeps getting worse. Here is some feedback directly from students and teachers at Picacho Middle School here in Las Cruces. And it's the same kind of stuff you see where people are being bullied and students are bullying because of race, bullying because of the way people look. And again, nothing really happens to the students. They don't learn to stop doing it. So the lack of discipline and the lack of consequences is really hurting these kids. It's hurting the school environment overall. But if you think about the kids who are doing the bullying too, it's going to hurt them in the long run. They're not learning how to control themselves. They're not learning how to function properly. So this is a lose situation for all of them. Now, drugs in Las Cruces Public Schools are also a big issue. The school district was even at city council a few months back talking about the fact that they are seeing a lot more cannabis being used in the schools. Now, cannabis was legalized here in Las Cruces and in the state of New Mexico just in the last couple years, and there are dispensaries everywhere. Las Cruces is very close to Texas, and so there's a huge market here, tons of dispensaries, dozens and dozens. You know, our city has granted over 100 permits for dispensaries, and so they're everywhere. And from talking to a student who was attending one of the main high schools here, I asked her about this, and she said that a lot of the kids will use the single stall bathrooms to go do their vaping, and they're vaping cannabis in the bathrooms. And when I asked her, where are the students getting the cannabis? She said that the kids know which dispensaries in town will give them cannabis, will not card them, will not actually enforce the age restrictions on it. So we have cannabis being widely available in this town. Of course, some students are getting it at their home as well, and that's also trickling out into the schools as well. Of course, bullying goes along with violence in the schools. The images that I have here are actually from an Instagram account that's no longer there, but it was a place where people were posting pictures and videos of fights happening in Las Cruces schools. So these are pictures of this district. Now, from that Equity Council data that I mentioned earlier, we have this interesting information about how much violence is happening in the schools. And so these data points right here are related to times when a student resource officer was called. That's essentially like a police officer type person who's in the school. There is a security. And these are big incidents when these people are being called. These are ones that resulted in a class 3 referral. That means this is a serious incident. And just looking at the data from year to year, for the whole year of 2023, they had 94 of these class 3 referrals. And then looking here, up to 2024, only through April of this year, 209 of these class 3 referrals. So this is increasing a lot year over year. And that's what parents are reporting as well. They're having issues with kids getting hurt, fights in schools, and it's really not acceptable. Here are some examples of what the data set actually looks like for those class 3 incidents at schools. And this is just a snapshot. You know, there are hundreds of these. So this is just one little screenshot of some of these, but you can see what kind of violations are happening: assault, battery, voyeurism, criminal damage to property, possession of marijuana. So these are the things that are happening in Las Cruces Public Schools. Now to touch on some new state laws that are affecting children in New Mexico. Now, these laws that I'm going to be talking about were passed during the 2023 legislative session, so that was last year. They are all in effect right now. And I'm going to talk specifically about two of these laws. So the first one is HB 7. That was the name of the bill, or the number of the bill, and it's the Reproductive and Gender Affirming Care Act. What parents need to know about this bill is that it allows children to receive transgender or abortion health care without any parental consent or notification, with no age restrictions whatsoever. Now, to be clear, even before this law was passed, there was already a state law here in New Mexico that children 14 and up could medically emancipate themselves so that they would be able to direct their own health care treatment without parental consent. So that was already happening here in New Mexico for a while. But now this is taking it a whole nother step forward, where there are no age restrictions at all. And teachers, school nurses, anyone who is a quote public body is being required by this state law to make sure they are allowing access to transgender and abortion care. These teachers and school nurses are now in a position where if they quote interfere with access to health care for transgenderism or abortion, and to be clear, interfering could be as simple as talking to the parents. So if they notify the parents that their kids are going to seek out this kind of treatment, these teachers and school nurses can be fined $5,000. So this was signed into law last year. All of the state legislators from down here in Las Cruces voted in support of this bill. Of course, the governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, approved this bill. And this is in effect right now here in New Mexico. I'm not going to read through the whole bill for you, but I encourage you to look it up. Here's just a snapshot of the bill, and you can see the specific wording where it is saying that public bodies have to make sure they are not interfering with, in any way, access to this kind of care. There are no age restrictions built into this. There's the $5,000 penalty. And it also says that municipalities cannot enact any laws that conflict with this. So that means if Las Cruces or Alamogordo or whatever other city, if they didn't want this to happen, too bad. It's against state law for them to change it. Now, the other law that I want to talk about is SB 397, and this one is about school-based health centers. Now, if you're a parent and your kids are attending school in Las Cruces Public Schools, you will probably remember that at some point you were given a permission slip type paper to allow your child to access healthcare in a school-based health center. Some of the schools have these directly in the school. Mayfield High School, for instance, is an example of a school here in Las Cruces that has a school-based health center right inside the school. Otherwise, they might be very close to the school within walking distance. And these clinics do offer sexual and reproductive health care services for children. They're expected to also include elective transgender procedures or referrals to those kinds of services without parental involvement or consent. Let me show you this law. And again, this one's SB 397. Look it up if you want to read it, but it's very clear in here. It's talking about the state funding these school-based health centers, and that they are going to provide mental health care. They're going to provide primary health care, reproductive health care. And look here too, it very specifically says mental health care. And this is important to take note of because transgender treatment falls under the umbrella of mental health care. Gender dysphoria is considered a mental health condition. Now, if a child does go to a school-based health center, they are given a survey, and the survey is, it's the type of thing where depending on what the student answers on some of the questions, they will end up with different questions on the survey. Right at the beginning, you can see that this survey tells the students, quote, young people like you can be seen for their sexual and mental health without permission from their parent or guardian. So this survey right up front is telling the kids, you can make these choices for yourself. We are not going to tell your parents about it. Some of the questions that are on this survey include, what is your gender, including, are you transgender? Which pronouns do you want to use? Which of these best describes you? Heterosexual, straight, gay or lesbian, bisexual, not sure. Have you had sex with men, women, transgender men, transgender women? So this is one of the questions that the students will see on the survey. Now, if they answer yes to having had sex, they get a bunch of more questions about sex, including some of these other ones that are shown here. For instance, what kinds of sex have you had in the past year? Select all that apply. And this gets really descriptive here. Vaginal sex, it says penis in vagina. Receptive anal sex, quote, partner's penis in your anus. Insertive anal sex, your penis in partner's anus. Give oral sex, your mouth on your partner's genitals. Or receive oral sex. So this is going into very graphic detail, asking kids about these things, asking if they've been having sex with transgender people, asking if they're having anal sex. All of these things are on this survey, and your child could end up seeing these if they are going to a school-based health center and end up filling out this survey. Now, for Las Cruces Public Schools specifically, there is an opt-out form, but this opt-out form is a little bit disingenuous. Remember, at this point, it's against state law to deny kids access to transgender or reproductive health care. And so even if the parent fills out this form and says, I don't give my permission for my child to go to the school-based health center, there's a little asterisk. And that's what this text is at the bottom of this slide. This is a quote directly from the opt-out form. Parental consent is not required for and shall not bar children regardless of age from the following services. And then, of course, it mentions in here pregnancy, family planning services, individual or group psychotherapy, substance abuse treatment. So all of these things fall under the umbrella of things that the school district can potentially provide to your child without telling you. Now, I think this is a huge attack on parents' rights to know what's going on with their children, to be involved in what's going on with their children. All right, so the next thing to talk about here is how transgenderism is being affirmed in Las Cruces Public Schools. And to be clear, I am not anti-gay or anti-trans. That's not what this is about. But I am pro-children's health, and this is a really big risk to children's health across the United States right now. So it's pretty common at this point that teachers in classrooms, including here in Las Cruces, will ask students what pronouns they want to go by. And this is happening even down to elementary school. This creates a lot of confusion for the children. It makes them really uncertain. You know, they think, okay, I thought it was a girl. I don't understand why my teacher is asking me this. It creates a lot of, internal disconnect and discord. They don't really understand what to do with that. And over time, this combined with the rest of the ways that this is being affirmed in the school, it's essentially encouraging them to question their gender. Now, rainbow libraries are another thing that are in many schools in New Mexico. You can see this graphic here is from GLSEN, which is a pro-LGBTQ organization. It's a national organization. And as of 2022, they were saying 169 schools in New Mexico have a rainbow library. Now, what is a rainbow library? It is a collection of books that is gender affirming and LGBTQ affirming. And GLSEN will send a rainbow library to any teacher who wants to have this in their classroom. Here in Las Cruces, there was a first grade teacher at East Picacho Elementary School who has one of these rainbow libraries in her classroom for first grade. And you can see she even sent out a message to the other teachers at the school to say, hey, other teachers, the students in my class love my rainbow library. I think you should get one too. Here's how you can get yours. So this is happening right here in Las Cruces. And again, these are books that are going to potentially create a lot of confusion for the children and make them potentially start to question their gender. Here in Las Cruces Public Schools, there is also a bathroom policy and locker room policy that all the parents need to know about. And that is JBD, that's the actual number of the regulation. And this policy allows students who are transgender to use whichever bathrooms and locker rooms they want to use. Think about that for a second. You could have girls in the locker room having to change clothes in front of biological males who are identifying as girls. This is a huge threat to girls' privacy and security. And we do know already that in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, a 12-year-old girl was raped in the bathroom in one of these gender-neutral bathrooms. So this is a huge concern. And I don't think this is the way that this issue needs to be dealt with. I think that if there are transgender students who need to have their own kind of bathroom space, they could have a single stall bathroom to use, but not be potentially exposing the other students. Another thing that has happened is in the last legislative session in 2023, according to state law, at this point, all bathrooms in schools for boys and girls are required to have menstrual products. This is, again, a very confusing situation for the students. I've heard from some of the teachers that some of the boys in school are kind of ticked off about this. They're like, why are there pads and tampons in our bathroom? And why are they? Oh, it's so that if there's a girl who's identifying as a boy, she still has access to menstrual products in the bathroom. And again, this is just part of an overarching theme that is encouraging students to question their gender. Now, all the parents in this state need to understand the perspective of the school boards and the education department here in New Mexico. So this right here is a picture of Andrew Sanchez, and he is from the New Mexico School Board Association. And during a training for school boards in New Mexico, he said, quote, "Parental rights end when you decide to send your kids to public school." Now, this isn't just a quote being taken out of context. It's not being taken out of context. He went on to say parents don't have a right to question you about what curriculum you are using. And so they really believe that when you send your kids to school, the teachers are the ones who get to make all the decisions, and the parents no longer have a right to do that. Now, I wanted to share a few facts with you about transgender healthcare. I have a lot more information about this if you're interested in this topic, but just briefly, it's really important for everybody to know 4 out of 5 kids grow out of their gender confusion. 4 out of 5 are going to grow out of it. Think about what that means in terms of what should happen for healthcare for these kids. The answer is nothing. If 80% of them are going to grow out of it, we shouldn't be doing anything medically to these kids that they're going to potentially then have to deal with later on. Now, that 4 out of 5 statistic I just mentioned, where is it coming from? That's coming from Finland's top pediatric gender specialist. Now, Finland and a few other countries in Europe have been really leading the world in affirmation of transgenderism. So they are far ahead of the US. They have been doing it for longer. They have a lot more experience with it. And right now they are putting the brakes on big time because they are seeing this is not working right. A lot of these kids are going to grow out of it, and they're not seeing good outcomes from transgender healthcare for children. You may have heard the UK just recently has put a moratorium. They can no longer do any sort of medical transgender care for children. They've closed their transgender clinic for children. So this is a huge thing that's happening in Europe, but the US is lagging on this whole issue. There are a lot of studies looking at transgender healthcare, and it's very clear at this point that it is not helping these kids. It does not reduce the risk of suicide. These are kids who, by and large, already have mental health issues before they come out as transgender. And the transgender healthcare does not change that. They are still having mental health problems even once they've gone through it. Transgender healthcare is very likely to cause sterility. If you think about that, if you're doing puberty blockers or doing any sort of surgeries or any of these invasive type treatments, you are changing the trajectory for this kid's whole life. If this kid at 12 years old thinks, oh, I'm a girl, but I think I'm actually supposed to be a boy, and she starts going down this path, there's a very high chance that she's never going to be able to have children. And this is not a decision that children need to be making. They're not even ready to make that decision at that point. We have at this point a lot of people who thought they were transgender who are detransitioning, trying to get back, but they really can't. You cannot reverse the effects of these hormones and these puberty blockers. You cannot reverse that double mastectomy. Those girls are never going to breastfeed their babies. It's just never going to happen. So These are huge impacts on these kids' lives in the long term. There are also studies looking at the long-term health risks. And we know that transgender hormones and puberty blockers are associated with increased risk of heart problems and blood clots. They reduce bone density, so the kids are, or adults at that point, more likely to have fractures and osteoporosis. So this is not a neutral thing. This is something that we really need to be looking closely at. And if the schools are encouraging this, it's a huge problem. And now one more topic is age-inappropriate, sexually explicit books in Las Cruces Public Schools. Now, Juan Garcia and I have been going up against this issue for over a year at this point, trying to show what's going on in Las Cruces Public Schools. We're being called book banners and a bunch of other names that are really not true. We are not book banners. What we are doing is asking Las Cruces Public Schools to assess the books that they have to make sure they're age appropriate. And that's really what they should be doing with every single material that's being used in the school. They should be checking to make sure that things are age appropriate. So these are just a few of the books that we have identified that are in Las Cruces Public Schools. And I'm not going to show the actual content of these books right here on this video because it's extremely graphic. It's not appropriate for children. I will post links in the description so you can go look. And I'm not talking about sex ed books. Those aren't the issue. We're talking about books that have very descriptive passages. This book, Push, for instance, has descriptive passages of a girl being raped by her father, even as an infant. And it has details of all of this. This Court of Silver Flames book that's listed here, this one is listed in the library for Sierra Middle School, as well as 3 high schools here in Las Cruces. And this book is sold as adult erotic fiction. It's not a kid's book in any way. It has very detailed graphic sex scenes throughout the book. Why is this in a school library? Jack of Hearts and Other Parts is another one that we have challenged because it also has very descriptive sexual passages. That particular book has teens having sex with adults. It has casual mentions of students having sex acts with their teachers or with their coaches. It has one of the main characters of the book soliciting sex through from adults through Grindr, having bondage sex. And it has all of this in very detailed passages, a lot of very vulgar languages. So these books are not, they're not ones that you would think of. People are trying to characterize this whole movement as like, we're just prudes and, you know, we're not okay with kids knowing about sex. And that's not the case at all. The question is, should you allow pornographic material in schools? So in defending having these books in the schools, I want you to hear some of the rationale that is coming from the school librarians and from the school board. So this first video here, this is the librarian from Mayfield High School defending having the Jack of Hearts book in the library.
Objective decision. Jack of Hearts is age appropriate for the 14 to 18-year-olds served by our library. Not only do they have the cognitive skills to understand and process this material, but most have already seen similar things elsewhere, and many have related life experiences themselves.
So she's basically saying it's okay. We should have this book in our libraries. Some of the kids might be having sex, and so they need this book. Now listen to this. This is Pam Court. She's one of the school board members.
It would read sometimes we're not so comfortable with, but from that we learn and we grow. It fosters growth. Reading fosters growth. And also it's an opposition to censorship. We are lucky in the Las Cruces Public Schools that if you, as a parent, object to material, you have the right to go and make those requests on behalf of your child, but you don't have the right to request that on behalf of other children. If you would not like your child to read something, that's great, but you can't tell me what my kids can read. And my kids in high school, had they chosen to read that book, I would have said, yes, absolutely. And then let's have a conversation. That's what reading and gaining knowledge and that free exchange of knowledge is all about. So,
now, just to be clear, if a student gets this book from the library, it's highly doubtful they're going to show it to their parents. And the parents don't really anticipate having this sort of pornographic material in the schools that they would need to be protecting their kids from. Now, here's one more. This is Patrick Nolan. As a side note, he is married to Las Cruces Mayor Pro Tem Bencomo.
There's talk about the parents. There's talk about friendship. There's even like suicide and how the kids are supporting one another. This book in our library, I think, is a positive thing for all of our students. It's representative, and it's important that we have these in our libraries, right? It's important that people see themselves in the books that we have available, and I think that's really important. We also have expert opinion. I think there's a disturbing trend of us not following experts in the fields that they are experts in. They are experts in them because that is what they're supposed to be, right? Health standards, learning standards, this book matches up with what we have identified here in New Mexico as appropriate for students in high school. We have experts in the library field and English field saying that this is an appropriate book for the audience that is attended to. And then we have our legal.
Okay, so there you have it right there. You can hear what their rationale is for saying they think it's okay to have very explicit books in Las Cruces Public School libraries. And they're saying, trust the experts. Do you know what? I think the parents are the experts for their children. And it's not okay to have this kind of material in a school library where it can be accessed by the kids and the parents have no idea that it's happening. Now, at this point, what we are pushing for is for Las Cruces Public Schools to assess all the books that they are putting in their libraries for age appropriateness, as well as to actually audit their collection and check to make sure that the books that they have are appropriate for the students and for the age of the students that are in the schools. Another issue that has come up multiple times is teachers assigning books that have explicit content in their classroom. And parents need to be notified if this type of material is going to be assigned to their children so that they have the opportunity to opt out of it. And that's not happening. So that's another thing that needs to happen with Las Cruces Public Schools with relation to these types of books. Now, as a result of the work that we've been doing over the last year, Las Cruces Public Schools has revised their book challenge process. They've made a lot of improvements to it. It's a lot more transparent. The school board now has nothing to do with selecting the members of the book review committee, but there's still one really big problem, and that is that parents are severely outnumbered on the book review committee. So out of 9 people, only 3 of them are parents. And I think that's a huge problem. Parents should compose at least half of this book review committee. All right, so now the last thing I wanted to share with you is some ways that you can get involved in helping to turn things around. The first is to sign a petition against those state laws that I was discussing. If you go to notmykidnm.org, you can sign a petition against these laws, and we will be petitioning the legislature to overturn these laws during the 2025 legislative session. So that's one thing really quick and easy that you can do. Please share that link with anybody else who might be interested. You will see on there 6 different laws. I only talked about 2 of them here just for time, but there are 6 different laws that are being challenged, and we really need as many people as possible to get involved with this, sign the petition, and share the link with everybody else. Now, here in Las Cruces, you can also opt your kids out of some of the explicit books that we have identified in the school library. Now, there are thousands of books in the library. We've identified a few dozen that are very egregious. There's probably more that we don't know about. And again, until Las Cruces Public Schools will actually audit their collection, there's probably still going to potentially be some of that kind of content in the libraries. But for now, at the very least, you could opt your kids out of those particular books. Another thing you can do is join the Education Action Committee of the Coalition of Conservatives in Action. Again, this is a nonpartisan group. We're all volunteers, and we're really just looking for more parents who are willing to help out because there's a lot going on, and we're trying to find ways to turn things around. So you can email me to join this committee. I'm at concerned4nm@gmail.com. Some other ways that you can get involved include engaging with the school board, starting to pay attention to what they're doing, what kind of policies they are passing. We are doing that on the Education Action Committee as well. We'd love to have your help with that. Even attending the school board meetings and watching to see what's going on makes a big difference, because the school board members need to know that parents in this community care what they do and that we actually care the outcome. We have opinions and points of view that needs to be taken into account. And the last thing is to share this information with your friends and family. So I hope that this was an informative presentation for you. I'd love to hear your own concerns about what's going on in Las Cruces Public Schools. And we're going to keep moving forward on this as much as we can, but we really need as many people to get involved as possible. Thank you.